Good morning. This is Dr. John Bennett broadcasting from sunny Miami. Today we have another in the series of MedGadget Hangout channel Hangouts, and today we're going to feature Tim Amukule and his work with the drone technology to transport pathology samples. And along with us we have a distinguished group of panelists, so a couple of panelists. We'll introduce them first. Okay, Gene, good morning.
Hi, good morning. This is Gene Ostrovsky. I'm an editor at MedGadget.
Welcome, Gene. And Simon?
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me to this hangout. My name is Simon Downs. I'm a developmental psychologist and medical student in Tokyo, Japan, and also a pathology enthusiast. I'm looking forward to this.
He's my main man. He's no matter what time of day or night. What time is it in Japan now?
Well, not too bad today. It's only 10 p.m.
Oh, this is prime time. Yep. Okay, Tim, could you please tell us a little bit, to start off, a little bit about your background and also regarding computers. And welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm a clinical pathologist. I'm here at Johns Hopkins, and my background is, well, my interest, what I spend a lot of my time doing is working in so-called low-resource countries. That's a euphemism for poor. So I work a lot in Africa and Asia, and my focus is always on the clinical lab. Because if you don't know why you're feeling bad, you don't know what to treat, right? So that's sort of the first thing you've got to address. Mm-hmm. And one of the problems I kept seeing over and over is a lack of access to laboratory testing, and it takes different forms, either lack of access to the tests themselves, or just people live too far and transportation is a problem. But in most of these places, there are good labs. It's just the people and the samples can't get there. So that's kind of how I sort of stumbled into the drone work. Yeah.
Very interesting.
That's my background.
How about as far as computers? Were you always a computer nut?
No. I mean, I'm comfortable with computers. I would say that. So and when I was a resident, I built a couple websites. I understand a little bit of programming. I've taken some programming classes, that sort of thing. But I've never done anything really high end. Okay. Well, what I would consider high end.
Okay, and could you tell us a little bit about your project, how it started, whose idea it was, etc.?
Yeah, so this is one of those. So I was working in Africa, as I said earlier, and the idea, and someone sent me a proposal. So it wasn't really my idea initially. Someone sent me a proposal to use drones to transport like pharmacy supplies, medication, in places with poor infrastructure. And it came to my desk because they were looking for someone who understood the environment in various countries around the world, and that's what I do. And so it came to me, and I and I wrote back, and I said, it was a medical student actually. So medical students have all the best ideas. And I set up a call with him, and I said, this is the worst idea I've ever heard. This is the worst idea I've ever heard. People need water. They need bicycles. They don't need drones. Right. But thankfully he persisted, and I said, okay, you know what? I'll look into it. I'll just see what's out there. I started looking into it, and I learned an incredible amount. So I learned, unmanned aerial systems, which we call drones, have been around a long time. The earliest one was in 1918. That was sort of a big project by the military. But now the difference is they're a lot cheaper. And I learned that they're so cheap that it does make economic sense if it's feasible. So I kept talking with this medical student, and I said, well, I'm happy to go along with it, but I said what we really need as a first step is to to make sure that the drone itself, the transportation of the via drone, does not affect the stability of blood, because it's not like moving shoes or books or something like that around. It's much more fragile. You can get hemolysis, you can get disruption of all, the various things you're trying to measure in the blood. So I said, we've got it. That's the first test. And he said, well, I have no idea how to do that. Can you do it for me? Can you sort of design that experiment? And I said, yeah, I'd be happy to. And so that's how we started down this road. Should I show you the experiment and the result?
Yeah, sure.
Here, okay. All right. Very quickly, let me pull this up here. Okay.
Yeah, we'll wait till you're done before you ask questions.
Yeah. Okay. I'll be done 2 or 3 minutes here.
There's no hurry.
Yeah. Boop. Share.
You got it.
Okay. Except it's not. It hasn't shown up on my screen yet. So give me a second, everyone.
Okay. We can see it fine.
Okay. Is it full screen or is it just?
Yeah, well, no, it's good. As good as you're going to get. 2 sets of samples obtained from 56 volunteers.
You still need to full screen the actual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to find the. Trying to get to the. Okay. Sorry, everyone. Okay. So here was the experimental design. So essentially, we got 2 sets of samples from healthy volunteers. It turned out to be 56. It could have been any number. We wanted at least 40 because it's easier statistically. Once you hit 40, it's a lot easier. The errors are a lot smaller. So we did 56. And each person gave us 2 sets of 3 samples. So each person gave us 6 individual tubes. And 1 set we drove to the flight field, and it just sat in the container. And the other set we drove to the flight field, and we flew it in the drone. And that's my baby right there, the drone. And then we brought them back, drove back to the lab at Hopkins, and we measured them. So it's pretty simple, straightforward experiment. And what we found, for me, was surprising. So we found that, and I'm just going to skip through this. And this just shows you the same schematic. So
Are you changing slides? Did you change slides?
Yeah, I changed slides.
Yeah, because it hasn't changed on the screen.
Oh.
Okay. You may have to click on the slide itself. There you go. Okay, experimental implementation.
Okay, good. So this is the same thing I just talked about. We had the volunteers. They each gave us two sets of 3 tubes. And the reason it was 3 tubes is we did hematology, coagulation, and chemistry testing. And and this just shows the rest of it, how we packed the samples to assure biosafety and all that, and then the flight experiments. And essentially, what we found, and I'm just going to show one panel here, but we did this for all the various tests. Okay. Why isn't this? Okay, here we go. So this is for potassium. So if you look at the figure on the left, the bottom left, the axis on the left, the y-axis shows the flown potassium, and the axis on the right shows the what I call T potassium, the terrestrial potassium, so the one that was not flown. And each dot represents both sets of values, and you can see they're really close to the line of identity. So essentially, what this shows is that the results from the flown tests and the results from the terrestrial tests that were not flown were pretty much exactly the same. And for me, it was a surprise because I thought, okay, so this is potassium, it's an electrolyte. So I thought, okay, it's hard to destroy. But even for cells, so we did the same thing for platelets, for white blood cells, for red blood cells, and all that. And we had the same results. So it's pretty exciting results. So it says what it suggests is that then we're ready for the next phase, which is actually to try to use this in real life.
Okay. Okay. Screen share now.
Yeah.
Very good. You want to open up for questions, Tim?
Yeah.
Okay, panelists, do you have questions of Tim?
Yeah, Tim, what kind of drone did you use for this?
Oh, I used the 3D Arrow from
3D Robotics?
Yeah, 3D Robotics, yeah.
And does it have like a payload bay, or how did
Oh
you?
yeah. So it has quite a bit of space in the fuselage where the batteries normally sit. So we just kind of shuffle the batteries around, and so we put the samples in there, and we actually built a custom, because there's no, for moving samples around, biological samples, blood samples in hospitals or in clinics, there are all these ways of carrying them already exist, but nothing existed for drones. So we had to build it. So we built a custom foam scaffold that would fit in that spot. So we measured it and built it. Yeah. And we was able to hold 21 samples.
Okay.
Okay.
What's the range?
Excuse me, Tim. We are in the midst of greatness. With John Monarsic, a famous pathology online teacher, has joined us. And I'd like to have Simon introduce John.
Wow, this is Dr.
Simon.
Monarsic, the first completely free online medical school, which brought me in the motivation to start medical school. I'm really happy to see Dr. Monarsic. I'd like to
Thank you very much. I don't deserve it, but I still love to hear that kind of stuff.
Well, you know, Tim, John has a huge following on the internet of pathology. He teaches pathology on the internet.
Oh, that's great.
That's completely relevant to this subject, John, because Tim is talking about drones transporting pathology specimens.
Right.
And we'll ask questions later about that. Okay, Tim, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, it's fine. No, it's great. Frankly, the most common question I hear when I say I'm a pathologist is, what is that? So the more people we can tell about it, the better.
You're a pathologist, Tim?
Yes, I'm a clinical pathologist.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Yeah.
You're with another pathologist there.
Yeah. Yeah. So any other questions?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you what's the range on this drone? How far did you fly these samples?
Yeah, so these samples we flew for about 40 minutes. Well, actually, we staggered them. We flew from 40 minutes down to 5 minutes for different sets of the samples. And the reason for that is I thought going into it that for sure we would see some impact of the drone flight on some of the analytes. In particular, I was worried about platelets because they're pretty fragile. And so I thought, well, maybe if we can stagger it, we can say, okay, up to 10 minutes of flight is okay, but beyond that is not okay. So that's why we designed the experiment that way. And so we flew it for a maximum of 40 minutes. And the reason we stopped at 40 minutes is because the battery was running out. So.
That's still pretty impressive that it went on for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
You think it looks like it's a plane kind of fixed wing, as they say.
Exactly.
Plane. Do you think there might be more vibration from like a helicopter kind of a design?
No. In fact, I think there'll be. So let me just share this one slide here. I think there would be less vibration from a helicopter type of drone. And so this is part of the reason. There were two reasons we wanted to use the plane type. Sorry, my screen share is really acting up.
Not yet.
Okay, here you go.
Okay, bingo.
Yeah, there were two reasons we wanted to use the plane type, and the reason was,
Oops.
okay, here you go.
Screw.
The reason was the plane type has can cover longer distances, as I show here, and it has higher launch agitation. So you have to either throw it or use a catapult or something. And so I wanted that. I actually wanted a system that would sort of shake the samples more, because I wanted to see what the impact would be in the worst examples. The helicopter type of drones are more gentle, which is why this is the type that Amazon is trying to use for delivering goods. And so they're great, but I actually wanted something that would cover longer distances and would have more agitation, not less. So yeah, it was a plane type, and that's actually my drone on the left there. That's the one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
John?
Who flew the drone?
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Did you do it in circles, or did you actually fly some, like, in a straight line for 40 minutes?
We did it in circles. So for the drone flights were by a. Am I back to? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. The drone flights were by. We had two flight engineers. There's a video with that accompanies the paper, and you can see one of them in the video. So we had two drone engineers who were both pilots, and they did the flying. I was there at the flight field, but I didn't have the certification at the time, so I couldn't fly them. And we flew in circles. It was pretty wide circle, about 1.5 miles in circumference. But that was it. We couldn't fly from one place to another.
Where was that taking place? In this country or in Africa?
Yeah, it took place in this country, about 30 miles north of where I sit in Baltimore now.
Okay.
Yeah. The flight field asked that I not disclose their location, so that's all I can say.
Okay. It seems the drones are everywhere now.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And you have to be certified to fly a drone nowadays?
Yeah. So you have to be certified. You have to be trained to fly the drone. You know, so you can fly it safely. And so I didn't have that training.
How long does that take? What kind of a process is that?
It's not that hard, actually. Not that hard.
One course, and then you try it or pass the test?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have to get any kind of special permission to fly pathology samples up in the air? I mean, is that an issue of any sort?
So the regulations for drone flight are that essentially there's a blanket ban in the U.S. And the ban is by location. So the ban says you cannot fly drones over populated areas or over areas of security interest, like a military barracks or something like that. So we did the experiment out in a flight field in an old dump. So that's where we flew the drones, the samples. And in order to get the volunteers, we got IRB what do you call it? Exemption to do the samples, to do the study. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
What's the learning curve to fly one? Is it really tough? How long did it take you to become comfortable to fly it relatively accurately?
Oh no, I'm still learning. I didn't fly it for the experiments. I had the two pilots fly it.
Okay, well the pilots, did it take them a long time to learn how to do it?
Oh, I don't know, because they had been doing it professionally.
Oh, okay.
They had done big contracts for it, but there are lots of people that fly them, especially the helicopter types are not hard to fly at all. I've flown some of those, and they're pretty intuitive. You can. I mean, this is part of the reason. I don't know if you guys have heard.
people have tried to use drones for essentially for crime,
Right.
to move drugs, to things like that. I think this is part of the reason why it's attractive, because it's fairly easy to learn.
Yeah, security issues too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You know, one comment, Tim. I was dealing with a village in Zambia,
Yeah.
and they were an outlying region. They were pretty far from the main town, which is Livingston in Zambia, and the big killer there is malaria. And there are all kinds of programs in Zambia that have tests that go to your village, and also medications that they test you. And this village didn't even know about the existence of the program. So it's more of a problem of connectivity. I mean, they have the resources, but they just can't get connected over there.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. I guess this is something that would help the connectivity and the access, because the big cities in Africa have a lot of resources, but the outlying areas don't.
Exactly, and so I think this technology could really help. For me, the big leap, the reason I even got to the point where I was doing an IRB application and you know, really trying to get the study off the ground, the reason I put that much effort into it is that is the price. Once I realized what the price was, I realized all of a sudden it went from something which I was skeptical about to something which was very feasible. I mean, the drones, the one we used for the experiment costs about $1,700.
That's not bad.
And it runs on rechargeable batteries, so it's cheap, you know, it's cheaper than a motorcycle. It makes sense. If the sample is not affected, which we've completed that study, right? And if it actually works in a true clinical setting. So that study hasn't been completed yet, but I think that's the next step, to say, okay, fine, the blood samples are not disrupted by drone transport, but does it actually work when a real patient or a real nurse or real care worker has to request it, get it, put the samples, and send it off? Can it really work in that system?
I have a question regarding that.
Go ahead, Tom.
You were saying that in transporting at long distances that you were worried about hemolysis, and how would you protect against hemolysis, and at what point would it become there's no way you could transport them? Would you, I mean, this is a simple question, would you slow down the metabolism, or would you freeze them? I don't know.
So yeah, okay, that's a great question. So there's essentially two ways. So the first is to get the sample there quickly. So the quicker you can get it there, the better. And so this is why a lot of labs will say, will give you a time limit, a window. They'll say, for example, I can give you an example from here at Hopkins. The time from the initial blood draw to when a complete blood count sample gets to the lab, that window is 8 hours. And if it's more than 8 hours, it's rejected. Okay, so time is an issue. The second issue is just to try to prevent agitation. So hemolysis can come from either agitation or change in the environment somehow. And so if you can control the more you can control the environment, the better. So that's why when we built this, what I was describing before, which was just a foam sample holder.
I see.
That was all to control the agitation. So that was.
I know. In pathology, you have to refrigerate a lot of samples. Does that kind of limit? Are refrigerated samples limited? I mean, you can't really do that, or is that irrelevant to drone carrying?
It's relevant, but it's not critical. So,
okay.
so in fact, in actual day-to-day laboratory testing, the overwhelming majority of samples are not refrigerated,
okay.
right? So if you can make the time from sample collection to delivery at the lab short enough, which is the point of the drone. If you can make that time frame short enough, you don't have to worry about refrigeration at all. You might still have to worry about temperature control, though. For example, in the winter, if we flew it in the winter, things could freeze, and that's a problem. But there are solutions for that. There are special kinds of containers that can keep temperature stable. So but these are all things to look at in the future. Yeah.
Okay. Gene, any more questions?
Yeah, Tim, I wanted to ask you about like real world situation. I mean, to me, it seems like one issue is that if you send the sample, somebody has to fly the sample. At least with current technology, I'm assuming there's going to be like autopilots in the future. But what other issues have you kind of seen that that clinicians in the future will have to deal with? If I mean, like say we want to set up a place in Africa to use drones to send pathology samples, right? What are the issues that they're going to face?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So actually, let me start the question by saying, forget Africa. Let me reframe the question as if we wanted to set up a drone transport network for blood samples anywhere, right? So I think we forget how much transportation of biological samples, especially blood, happens here in the U.S. So there's something like 200,000 individual labs out there that are registered in the U.S. And most of those are really small places that essentially do collection and then move the samples to a bigger lab to be measured. So it's already happening. The transportation piece is already happening. So if they wanted to make that more reliable and less dependent on having a car and all this kind of stuff,
Construction.
Yeah, exactly. What's the way forward? And essentially, there's still two issues to deal with. Gene, you hit one on the head. One is technological. But technological problem is a smaller one. So drones can do autopilot pretty well. There are other issues like the landing accuracy and so forth. Okay, and I'll lump all those in sort of a technological bin. But my sense is all those problems will be addressed sometime in the next 2 to 3 years. The other half of the problems are regulation. So the FAA's goal is one of their biggest priorities is safety, and so they've put essentially a blanket ban on drone flights in populated areas, and so I think that will be the biggest. I think that will be a bigger issue than sort of the technological piece. But I think it will change eventually. Once they figure out how to integrate drones into regular air traffic, because we don't think about it a lot, but there's a lot of air traffic already in the skies. Mm-hmm. For example, here at Hopkins, we have a helipad. There are a few other hospitals here in Baltimore alone that have helicopters. So several times a day, those helicopters are flying back and forth. And so if you're also going to have other things in that airspace, aka drones, you've got to figure out what the rules are. Who goes first? How do you detect each other? Is there going to be a flight controller? What does that mean? And there are people working on that right now. So mm-hmm. I'm optimistic about it.
That's a big barrier to overcome.
So you're saying it's mostly a regulatory issue, that the technology is there, that you can. Are you saying that practically you can really kind of do this already in terms of the technology being able to do it?
Yes, I would say yes, but it's a qualified yes. So yes, with a lot of validation and people who know what they're doing and are careful about it. So it's not. To me, the current state of again, these are not the military type drones that cost tens of millions of dollars or even more to build, that are much more sophisticated. These are the kind of off-the-shelf drones. A lot of them can fly in a piloted fashion, but in terms of their specifications, they're just not well characterized enough to be used by someone off the street, to move biological samples. Now, if you had, for example, my group, we're always doing validation. So for example, we've published the validation of the stability of the blood samples. But we're working all the time to really characterize, okay, what's the landing accuracy of this drone. And the reason for that is to figure out, okay, would it work in a hospital environment? How big does the field have to be to make this work? But in order to work, people need to do that kind of really careful, really thorough validation.
What about really dangerous pathogens and carrying them through the air? Is that an issue?
Yeah, it is an issue, but it is not an additional risk. So dangerous pathogens are already being transported, and I think that any pathologist will tell you that. Most people in the public are not aware of this, but they're already being transported by air today, and by road today. So they're already this is already happening. However, the way to deal with that is to follow the regulations. There are pretty strict regulations for how you need to pack biological samples for transport, and you have to be certified to do this. So for example, before we did the drone experiments, I took the classes for it's called an IATA class for packaging of biological samples. So you have to be certified to do that in a safe manner. So yes, we need to be careful about it, but it's not, to my mind, it's not an additional risk beyond. So in that way, drones are not an additional risk.
Tim, would you say with drone technology, it's kind of similar to stem cell and 3D printing, where their developments are a little quicker in places where there's less regulation, like China and Korea? You think drone technology will progress quicker in less regulatory countries?
I don't know, but in general, that tends to be in general, regulation always lags behind technology. Yeah. That's sort of the way of the world, and I think it'll be the same for drone technology. I think you'll have people pushing the envelope. Like I feel like I'm pushing the envelope here, and then eventually, once those people show that it's safe, it can be done in a way that improves patient outcomes and saves money, then you'll have the wider adoption. Yeah. Is the school funding your projects, or is it NIH, or is it out of your own pocket? Am I being too nosy? I need funders.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Terribly, yes. No. We are not grant funded.
Okay.
I had a little bit of research funds that I put towards this initial study, and I also I've now written for 3 grants.
Okay.
And I've gotten one of them, so we have enough for about 6 more months of work.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to just keep looking for money because as I said earlier, I think there's another 2 to 3 years of work to be done here to answer the big questions. The questions about temperature, safety, accuracy, the true impacts on patient outcomes, the economic, all those things, all those questions have to be answered for me to say, the questions that Gene was asking, for us to say, okay, yes, this is a viable alternative that we should really drive forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, very good, Tim. And if someone want to get a hold of you, how would they get a hold of you?
You can Google me, or you can email me.
Okay, just Google you and they can track you down. So you're John Hopkins, correct?
Exactly, I'm at Hopkins. Yeah.
Well, Tim, I'd like to thank you for coming out, and also the panelists for coming out. And we look forward to hearing from more developments from you in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, good day, everybody.
Thank you. Take
Bye.
care.